The Logitech G810 Orion Spectrum keyboard, complete with Romer G mechanical switches, is one of the newer offerings from Logitech, using their proprietary mechanical key switches. There's a lot of love about this keyboard, but is there enough to differentiate it from the already saturated mechanical keyboard market? Let's find out. Let's start off this review with the things that definitively distinguish this keyboard from the rest of the market. Logitech's own Romer G mechanical switch. While I can't substantiate all the claims that Logitech makes about their switch, such as the fact that it's capable of 70 million key presses, or that it's 40% more durable than traditional mechanical key switches, mainly because I don't have the endurance to press the keys so many times, things such as the actuation distance and design of the switch are things that I can work with. Logitech has made the Romer G to have an actuation distance of 1.5 millimeters instead of the average 2 millimeters on a Cherry MX switch, a 25% shorter travel distance. However, in my personal use of the keyboard, I wasn't personally able to take use of that shorter distance. While I don't flail away at my keyboard when gaming or typing, I do tend to apply a lot of pressure with my fingers and my wrists, and that large amount of pressure actually leads me to bottom out my keys whenever I use them. And bottoming out the Romer G switch actually makes it feel spongy or mushy and leads to me fatiguing my fingers after longer gaming or typing sessions. After a few sessions with the G810, I realized I couldn't use it like my MX Brown switches, and it required a bit more finesse, which allowed me to avoid fatigue a bit better. But I think I'm too ingrained in my heavy pressure typing ways to actually fully utilize a switch that's meant more for agility. So while I can't fault Logitech for the Romer G switch, I also know that I personally dislike it. But key switch preferences are subjective, so be sure to take my personal assessment of them with a grain of salt. The switch isn't entirely linear, so there's a tactile bump that you can feel when using them, but it doesn't carry the full sensation of a Cherry MX switch either. Almost as if it's a hybrid between the standard rubber dome and Cherry switch. One of the things that Logitech has done really well with on the Romer G switch is the implementation of the center-mounted LEDs. Typically, RGB keyboards have the LEDs top mounted, which leads to an asymmetrical dispersion of light. However, with the way the Romer G switches were engineered, the lighting comes through the center of the key, leading to a more balanced lighting scheme across the board. And the lighting does look fantastic on this keyboard. Most colors were accurate, with white being slightly off, as it always is on an RGB LED. And looking at the design of the rest of the keyboard, there's a full set of media keys with a volume control wheel, which I found had a pleasant texture to it. The G810 comes with a non-removable braided cable with a rubber housing found attached where it protrudes from the keyboard. On the back, there's non-slip rubberized pads, a texturized backing design, and pop-out stands which allow for 3 different angles of elevating the Orion keyboard. And it should also be noted that there is no included wrist rest for the G810. Outside of that, there's a full 104 key layout with the addition of a gaming key, which comes as a default Windows lock toggle button. The only thing that I really disliked about the layout of the keyboard was the repositioning of the backslash button next to the left shift, since I exclusively use the left shift when typing. The shortened length of that key tremendously cut down on my typing speeds by nearly 10%. Again, not something that will bother everyone, but it was a difficulty I encountered with the peripheral. The plastic housing on the keyboard is sturdy, and the frame didn't flex at all under any stress that I put on it with my high levels of typing pressure. There's 26 key rollover instead of the typical 6 or N key varieties, which is plenty for most users. And as far as macros are concerned, there are not dedicated macro keys, with Logitech instead resorting to assigning them via their software. Which is a perfect segue into the Logitech software itself, aptly named Logitech Gaming Software. Not only does Logitech provide the standard issue set of RGB lighting effects such as the color wave, star effect, fixed color, breathing, and so forth, it also has implemented the ability to have individual games to have different profiles. A feature that I first saw with the Logitech G633 Orion Spectrum headset. And the implementation of this is pretty innovative of Logitech and definitely helps the immersion levels of games to be increased. Also, another distinguished feature that Logitech has implemented with the Orion Spectrum keyboard is the fact that you can also adjust the lighting characteristics of the illuminated logo, as well as the caps, num, and scroll lock indicators. The software is well laid out and simple to use. Something that is easily taken for granted, but as I found out in my review of the G.Skill KM780 keyboards, it's not something that all hardware manufacturers can do well. So Logitech deserves credit here for their software design team. So getting to the end of the review and wrapping things up, Logitech has done some really good things on the G810 Orion Spectrum keyboard. The Romer G switches, while I have a personal distaste for them, provide some really great lighting and improvement on the actuation distance over traditional Cherry MX switches. Beyond that, Logitech has brought a well-designed, sturdy, and frankly good-looking keyboard to the market. And their added software implementation of lighting schemes for various games helps to put the G810 above most other RGB keyboards that I've reviewed. However, while the G810's overall features and design make it one of the better keyboards that I've tested, the anticipated South African pricing of the board makes it a tough pill to swallow. Currently, Wootware has the anticipated pricing of the peripheral at just under 3,200 Rand, making it several hundred Rand more expensive than the Corsair Strafe K70 or the Cooler Master Master Keys Pro L. And while the Logitech Orion Spectrum has a few distinct features to its name, such as the switch and lighting profiles, I wouldn't personally decide to spring the extra cash for the keyboard. So unless you're dying to have the added immersion of your keyboard flashing different colors in the midst of gaming sessions, or if you long for the shorter actuation distance of the Roamer G Switch, I really don't think that Logitech has positioned the board well enough in price for me to recommend it over some of the other offerings that are in the market. And that wraps it up for this review on the Logitech G810 Orion Spectrum gaming keyboard. Big thanks to Logitech South Africa for sending it over for review. You can like this video if you found it helpful, dislike it if you thought it was poo, subscribe to stay up to date on all of my tech related content, and if you're looking to watch more of my videos, click right here to see my recent review of the Cooler Master Master Keys Pro S. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers.